I keep telling everybody they should move on and grow. Some do, but not us.
What if the greatest thing that ever happened to Captain America was also the very thing that broke him? Because for a man preaching acceptance to the rest of the world, Steve was clearly the one person who couldn't actually let go. To understand what happens to Steve in Endgame, we have to talk about that massive 5-year time jump. In most blockbusters, a time jump is just a cheat code, a way to skip the boring cleanup montage and get right to the next fight. Endgame does the exact opposite. It uses the jump to strand you in the miserable, unfixable aftermath of Thanos' snap and forces you to just sit in the wreckage. And where do we find Captain America in this dead, quiet world? In a community center, leading a grief support group. Think about how loaded that is for this guy specifically. Steve was always a man out of time, frozen for 70 years, woke up having lost his whole generation, his culture, Peggy, everything. The MCU told us over and over that he didn't know how to exist without a mission. Peace itself basically scared him.
Captain America, God's righteous man, pretending you could live without a war.
Now the war is not just over, it's lost. And he's a man out of time all over again. Except this time, he lost the future instead of the past. So what does he do with all that? He becomes a counselor, which, if you've seen The Winter Soldier, is a direct echo to Sam Wilson's job. Now Steve is running the same kind of circle, except the trauma is universal and the whole planet is the patient. The most disciplined super soldier on Earth, sitting in a circle of ordinary broken people, listening to a stranger describe crying on a first date, and the most powerful thing he can offer them is to nod and say, "I hear you." Now this is where the writing gets sneaky smart. There's a psychological concept that fits what Steve becomes here: the wounded healer. It's the idea that some people throw themselves into fixing everyone else's pain precisely because they can't face their own. Steve sits with that group and preaches gratitude. He tells them to move forward, to make something of the life they've got left. But has he really moved on? Hold that thought, because first, we have to talk about the two most annoying words in the English language: move on. That's Steve's whole gospel in 2023. Look on the bright side. He literally points out to Natasha that the Hudson River is cleaner now, that a pod of whales came back because there's less shipping traffic.
Okay, what?
Listen to that again. Half of everyone you love is dead. But hey, the whales are back.
Are you serious?
That's basically toxic positivity, and the movie knows it. Because when he tries this cheerful nonsense on Black Widow, the movie was also smart enough to call him out on it too.
You know, if you're about to tell me to look on the bright side, I'm about to hit you in the head with a peanut butter sandwich.
Because she can see what he's doing. The relentless look on the bright side thing isn't healing. It's a wall. And honestly, fair. That reaction is the most human moment in the film, because we've all been on the receiving end of everything happens for a reason while we were falling apart, and we've all wanted to launch a sandwich at the messenger. But here's the twist that turns Steve from preachy to tragic. The whole time he's telling the world to let go and step into the future, he's carrying a compass in his pocket that has a photo of Peggy Carter, a woman from the 1940s who moved on decades ago, who married someone else, lived a full life, grew old, died. He is begging strangers to release the past while gripping his own ghost with both hands. That's not hypocrisy because he's a bad person. It's hypocrisy because he can diagnose the disease in everyone else and can't take the medicine himself. Because if he admitted out loud that he can't move on either, the whole thing would collapse. And later, it does collapse. For one honest second.
I keep telling everybody they should move on and grow. Some do, but not us.
There it is. The mask slips. The grief counselor confesses he's the one who never left the waiting room. Now let's talk about what Steve stops being in those 5 years, because the movie makes it almost entirely visual, and it's brilliant. He isn't Captain America anymore. Not the leader, not the symbol, not the guy who shows up when the world needs saving. He's a man in a folding chair running a grief group, and that's not a gap the movie forgot to fill. That's the statement. Because think about what Captain America as a symbol actually promises. It's a whole worldview. There are good guys and bad guys, and if you're brave enough and good enough, and you hit hard enough, you win. That's the whole brand. Now apply that promise to what just happened. Half the universe didn't die in a fair fight. There was no bad guy to outpunch in the moment. Thanos snapped his fingers and erased half of all life in the universe. How do you block a finger snap? You don't, and Steve knows it. So stepping back into that role as Cap wouldn't feel like honor. It'd feel like a lie. It'd be cosplaying as the guy who was supposed to protect everyone, standing in the ashes of everyone he didn't protect. By walking away from being Captain America, the movie suggests something devastating. Steve no longer believes he has to be Captain America. The symbol died in that snap. What's left is just Steve, a tired man in a community center. And that's a much harder guy to be. Okay, let's zoom out for a sec, because Endgame pulls off something you almost never see. It splits the 5 stages of grief across 5 heroes, like the world's saddest group project where everyone picked a different slide. Thor? Denial. Retreats into beer and video games and refuses to look his failure in the eye, because looking means feeling. Hawkeye? Anger. His family turned to dust, so he goes full John Wick, hunting criminals across the globe because he can't understand why they got to live while his kids didn't. Grief with a sword. Black Widow? Depression. She buries herself in coordinating the entire planet's survival, helping everyone, saving no time for herself, quietly giving up on the idea that she deserves to be okay.
If I move on, who does this?
Hulk? Acceptance. Bruce actually does the work, merges his 2 halves, makes peace. He's the one who came out the other side.
Hulk out! Bruce.
And Steve? Bargaining. The support groups, the move on, the whole desperate strategy of trying to earn his own peace by manufacturing hope for other people. 5 heroes, 5 stages. 1 tragedy refracted 5 ways. And the reason it lands is that you don't need a psychology degree to recognize every single one of these people. You've been one of them. Maybe you've been all 5 in a single bad week. Now watch what happens when they finally have to suit back up, because the Steve who picks the shield back up is not the Steve who put it down. The Avengers crack time travel. They go back into their own greatest hits to snatch the Infinity Stones before the bad guys ever get them. And this is where the 5 years of quiet hell show up on Chris Evans' face. Because when 2023 Steve runs into 2012 Steve, he wins the fight. Not with strength, not with a superior moral high ground. He wins by leaning in and whispering that Bucky is alive, freezing his younger self with the one thing he can't process. He cheats. The same guy, minutes earlier, dodged an entire elevator brawl by leaning toward a squad of enemy agents and murmuring 2 words, "Hail Hydra," to trick them into handing him the prize. A moment, by the way, that drove me nuts for a week. And maybe that's one of the clearest signs of what those 5 years did to him. The unbreakable Boy Scout has learned to lie, to bluff, to fight dirty. Why? Because the 5 years taught him the most bitter lesson of all. He played clean. He made every noble call in the book. The most costly one was refusing to trade Vision's life, and he still lost. Half the universe paid the price. So honor and pride quietly took a back seat to something colder: results. He's not a symbol of perfect virtue anymore. He's a tired pragmatist who's seen exactly what losing cleanly costs, and he is done paying that price.
I said we'd lose. You said, we'll do that together too. And guess what, Cap? We lost.
Now here's the piece that elevates this from sad character beat to genuinely elegant storytelling. And it's all about the man Steve spent a decade arguing with, Tony Stark. Go back all the way to the Avengers in 2012. First time these two really clashed.
You're not the guy to make the sacrifice play, to lay down on a wire and let the other guy crawl over you.
I think I would just cut the wire.
Freeze it right there.
Free.
Because that one exchange is the seed of everything. Their entire journey is those 2 men slowly, painfully swapping places. Tony starts as the guy who'd cut the wire, selfish, brash, all ego. And across 10 years, he grows, until in Endgame, he does the exact thing Steve swore he never could. He lays down on the wire by sacrificing himself. The man who'd cut the wire becomes the wire. And Steve? Steve starts as the guy who'd always jump on the grenade, the one whose only setting is self-sacrifice. And his growth is the opposite. His arc isn't learning to die for people. He's been ready to do that since scene 1. His arc is learning that he's allowed to live. The The writers said it cleanest. Tony had to lose his life to become his best self. Steve had to get a life to become his best self.
For Steve to become his best self, he needs to get a life. And for Tony to become his best self, he needs to lose his.
Two arcs, crossing like scissors. And the 5-year time jump is the only reason Steve's half works. You can't have him retire into happiness unless you first watched him try everything else. Try to be a civilian, try to heal, try to move on, and fail. The community center is the proof. He can survive the modern world, he can't belong to it. Which brings us to the portal scene.
Avengers!
Avengers assemble. Now, here's the detail that tells you the Russo brothers understood this character to his bones. They had Chris Evans deliver that line not as a booming battle cry, not as a general rallying the troops. They told him to say it quietly, almost a whisper. They knew theater crowds would be screaming so loud they might drown it out. And they chose the whisper anyway. Because a roar is what the 2012 Cap would have done. The kid who needed to prove he was in charge. This Steve doesn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. He's not commanding an army. He's exhaling a prayer he wasn't sure he'd ever get to say. It's not "everybody follow me." It's "we're all here. We made it. Let's finish this." The loudest moment in the movie played as the softest. That's not an accident. That's the whole 5 years compressed into one breath.
Assemble.
Here's the truth the whole movie was quietly building toward, and it's the reason why Steve's arc hits so many people right in the chest. Peace isn't only something you win for other people, it's something you're allowed to claim for yourself. Steve spent his entire life believing his body, his time, his heart all belonged to the world, that he was public property with a star on his chest. The 5 years broke that lie. The universe took everything from him, his era, his love, his friends, his purpose, and gave him nothing back but silence. And in that silence, he finally figured out that the bravest thing a soldier can do isn't dying for the mission. It's knowing when the mission is over, setting the weapon down, and going home. So the next time someone tells you Endgame is just a big, loud CGI fireworks show, tell them the most important scene isn't the portals, or the snap, or the whisper. It's a tired man in a folding chair, in a room with bad lighting, who has to learn that he's allowed to be happy, and that it might be the hardest fight of his life. Because here's the thing, and I want you to actually sit with this one. You've probably got your own version of that shield, the role you play so well that everyone forgot you might be tired of carrying it. The "I'm fine, look, the whales came back" you tell people while you're carrying more than you let on. What would it take for you to put it down? If this made you see that whole movie differently, or made you think about a shield of your own you've been carrying too long, hit subscribe, because we do this every week. We take the stories you think you know and find the quiet human thing hiding underneath. And drop your takes in the comments. I'll be reading them. I could do this all day. Yeah, I know.